if I can get a motion to approve the regular township meeting minutes from April 14th.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. We're going to go on to roll call. Mr. Christopher,
Yes.
Mrs. Elbadawi, abstain. Dr. Rose,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
and Mayor Kinnear.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on to reports. Who would like to start? Okay.
Is it on? Can you guys hear me? I can't hear myself.
Is it on? Yeah, no?
Look
Yeah.
on the side of your microphone. If it's lit up, it's on. Yep. It's coming out the speaker over here.
Oh, that's
First thing anyway.
okay. Well, I missed last meeting. I was traveling for spring break, and so I didn't get to report on the library meeting of April 10th. At the meeting, they discussed how they're still working on plans towards working on solar panels for this building. And the strategic subcommittee is working to revamp the library packet, which is, I guess, not their, just their packet on the library functionings. And they discussed participation in the Memorial Day parade. Believe it or not, Memorial Day is just around the corner. We had a meeting of the personnel subcommittee on April 11th. And the planning board will be meeting May 1st, and the DRC for this month is canceled for business. I wanted to share a little bit of community information. I enjoyed the town-wide yard sale. Given the rain date, it still was a wonderful event. So everybody who participated, and thank you for the lovely things that I picked up. Arbor Day was absolutely lovely. Mayor Kinnear read a beautiful proclamation, and Kathy Easton and Jackie Johnson of Shade Tree educated the community about Arbor Day and the importance of trees. And they gifted the children with white fringe tree saplings. So it was really nice. I don't know if you all remember, but in March I reported about a youth robotics team heading to the World Championship. And I wanted to congratulate Cranbury 8th grader Shivani Mukamala and her team of 15 for winning the highest out of 64 teams in their division, the first Tech Challenge robotics competition. So they won the world competition. So congratulations to them. Yeah, and that's all I have. Any questions?
Sure. Apparently the microphone's working. Let's see. There was a HPC meeting on the, not to bury the lead, we spent a lot of time talking about our topic for later today, so I'll hold off on that. They're also working on a CLG grant to survey 87, I think, properties. Thank you for the nod in the back. In and around the historic zone, 65 additional properties will be submitted to planning in June. There's also a working session that day with the architects to review design guidelines, specifically mentioning signage, lighting, things of that nature. There's also a question about the hamlet and how is that going to be eligible for potential protection as it crosses through multiple municipalities. And obviously we'll get into a little bit more later today. On the 23rd, we had a meeting with the Board of Ed. I see some friends here. That's very exciting. I'm not sure if any of you are continuing to look at all the updates of the construction, but it is amazing, and you can basically watch it almost in real time. The Performing Arts Center specifically is sort of growing before our eyes. But I think that Board of Ed meeting was very short, which was astonishing and exciting, I think, for some of the folks who were there. But it was great. Things are moving along great. The Municipal Alliance did not have quorum this month, did not meet. Any questions for me?
Yeah. Can everyone hear me? Excellent, very good. Okay, so we had a Parks and Rec meeting on the 16th of last week. We relayed to them the Township Committee's disinterest at this time in splash pad. And I also conveyed to them going forward, we would like to see them maybe sort of amend their process for coming up with plans and projects like this to get more public input and to work before they come to us. They agreed. They're also, maybe towards the end of the year, going to do a quick 2-slide PowerPoint presentation on the splash pad, just in sort of future consideration of such a project, but not actively consider it. We had a traffic subcommittee meeting this past week. Barbara Rogers and I attended. We touched on a number of issues that are overall concern to the township, but in particular, township resident raised some issues, and we went over all these issues. We haven't really discussed them yet, but the police chief, our traffic engineer, was there as well. I won't go over all the details, but I will say that what did come out positive out of that meeting is that we're going to consider possibly looking into curb bump outs to what is on North Main Street across from School Lane. Essentially, it's a curb bump out that sort of expands the sidewalk a little bit, and it's a traffic calming measure and a pedestrian safety. We're very early stages looking into the possibility of putting bump outs, a bump out maybe either on Main Street across from Station Road or on one of the corners of Station Road. And additionally, as an ongoing bike network plan that Barbara Rogers has been working so diligently on for the past years, when we go to survey Plainsboro Road for repaving in 2026, is that right, Denise?
Yes.
Yeah. Look into the possibility of considering a possible bike lane on that road, but again, this is very early stages, but it's something that we are actually looking into. And that's pretty much it. Barbara, if you want to expand on anything at the traffic meeting, that'd be great, but okay.
There we go. Yeah, thanks. The only thing that I just want to add is that the township continues to address and review concerns of residents regarding traffic. Many are county roads, and we require, consultation, coordination with a lot of some of the ideas, and whether they approve them or not. Traffic calming measures and speed reduction efforts are continuing. And the one thing that we did want to mention that a new linking crosswalk will be put in on Old Trenton Road by Millstone Park to West Washington Road. So it's already been approved, and we're going to be moving forward on that. And if you haven't seen me walking around town, here it is. This is the plan in a nutshell. So there are 5 gateway signs that have gone up. They're those white signs that are supposed to be traffic calming, and letting you know to slow down our town. But thanks.
Can I ask one quick question for you guys? So the bump outs on Station, we can do regardless of the fact that Station is not fully a township road? And are there anything else? So is there anything else, a bit more traffic slow?
No speed bumps on Station Road. They're talking about bump outs at the corner of Station and South Main.
I mean, in addition.
There'll be station on Station Road. No, we've exhausted all measures on that road with the county.
Barbara, did you have more updates outside of that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to-
I wasn't sure if, are you done with your update?
Matt, you're done?
Yes.
Okay, all right,
Great.
you're up.
I'm up. It was a busy week, 2 weeks. At EC, an environmental commission meeting, they identified steps. We're working on a grant called the Community Energy Plan, and we're looking at how we use our energy and how we can reduce our energy use and use renewables. There's a community wildlife habitat certification. This continues. I certified you. You do not have to order these, but if you are certified by the National Wildlife Federation, you just go there and they have a couple of quick questions, whether you consider your property as a community wildlife habitat. And so we want 100 homes so that our whole entire Cranbury become a wildlife habitat certified. The ECs are continuing to find ways to educate the public on the environment. One big initiative is partnering with the school on an outdoor classroom initiative. This is really exciting. They can use native plants, composting, and it's for students as well as the public. So that's really exciting. What's coming up is on June 7th, the Townwide Preserve Trail Maintenance Day in conjunction with Parks, EC, the Mayor's Wellness, and Scouts. The Scouts will be leading a walk at Cranbury Preserve, and we'll be cleaning up, I'm not sure which preserve, one of the preserves that day. There was a Shade Tree Commission work session. It's very appropriate that there was Arbor Day, and you're talking about how important trees are in our town, and it gives us such character, but also environmental benefit. They reviewed and discussed the tree removal replacement ordinance, and they're still working on some appendices and updating the application to make it a little bit easier to use, and considering hiring an arborist with some authority to look at the trees. Let's see. The traffic subcommittee we already did. One of the things that the Green Team or the Environmental Commission last year or the year before, we worked on community solar energy, partnering with solar landscaping, since they meet all the requirements that requires for a community solar energy project. So I spoke to them, and we're updating our website if anyone was interested. It was located at the DPW web about community solar, but we had to take that down because there are now updates, and it just needs updating. So it had outdated information. The exciting part is there's no longer a third-party billing, and now all of this is through PSE&G. So community solar are proper warehouses, and the energy is piped into PSE&G. It helps lower your bills if you don't know anything much about it. There will be more information about it. Looking at ways to have automation for LMIs, which is low to moderate income, and possible ways to send out information and a new code in order to become a part of this. This saves money and energy. And there are additional projects going up in our town as well as towns throughout the state. And another thing I am a part of, and there was a meeting, is the Middlesex County Ag Development Board meeting. That was 3rd of April. And we reviewed and the board approved a resolution for an application to hold special occasion events on preserved farmland. And one of those were in Cranbury. It satisfied all the aspects of this special occasion application, and with the county and the township. So special occasion event became law in 2023. So they could preserve farmlands now can hold cultural or social events, including a wedding, on preserved farmlands. So that's it. I tried to make it quick.
Any questions for Barbara?
I have a quick question. The last item that you brought up, this wedding facility. I know we spoke about it briefly at the traffic subcommittee meeting. And we're talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least 6 times a year with up to 200 attendees.
They can, but they did not apply for all of them. You can, but
Okay.
They did not apply for all of them.
But just I'm wondering, that's a pretty significant traffic impact.
All of that is reviewed by the township and county. There is a traffic study that's done prior to it, and they have to meet certain requirements in order to.
So where are they at now? So they're not doing 26 events. They have a total
I'd have to
number?
look through the exact number, but I don't think it's up to 26. Yeah, I mean this is what they have to submit in order to do it. So it's 30. Yeah.
I'll be pretty brief. I'm sad to say I brought more in my home than left my home at the townwide yard. But it is a reminder that this coming weekend is the spring. So at the Department of Public Works lot, they have extended hours from Saturday and Sunday. So all of the things that you sell and that you no longer want, you may bring there. There's a list of approved and things that you can't drop off there. So just make sure you educate yourself before headed over there. I had the pleasure last Saturday of spending about an hour and a half with Troop 2024. I worked with 5 scouts as they went toward their community service badges. So we brainstormed some ideas locally here in Cranbury how they could achieve their goals. So that was a real pleasure. I did hear back from South Brunswick Township, the mayor and the TC. We're gonna have a brief meeting in about 2 weeks, but I was thrilled that I took a ride over and exit 8A was thoroughly cleaned up on the New Jersey Turnpike. authority. So all that garbage, until it piles up again. But some folks from South Brunswick also reached out, and hopefully some residents too. I supplied the number, so that's a start. But they at least listened, which is great. So take it right over there. Nice clean exit ramp. And then Arbor Day, as Mon had mentioned, that was a pleasure. Second grade class. It brought me back to the year that we moved here, and you never forget your first year in Cranbury because you do all these firsts. And my daughter was in second grade our first year here in Cranbury, and I remember her tree is on Brainerd Lake, right on Main Street. So I think about that when I pass it, but that was an absolute pleasure. And the day was gorgeous. It was like perfect weather. Although one kid could really endure it. He was very, very dramatic and didn't think he could hardly bear to make it through the ceremony. But he made it. I'm happy to report. He's still with me. So it was really funny. It was great, kid. Right? So that's really all the updates I have. We don't have any department head or subcommittee updates tonight. Do we have any follow-ups from our last meeting? I don't think so. No? Okay. All right. Board sessions. I'm super stoked because I've been reading this list for weeks now, but I'm happy to say that Gabriella Villarini has filled the vacancy on C for a full member, which expires on 12/31/26. So now that leaves 4 vacancies on our commissions. We have a first and second alternate on the EC Environmental Commission. We have the second alternate on the Municipal Alliance, and we have a full membership on Shade Tree that is still open. Okay, all right. And with that, we'll move to, we have one first reading this evening.
We're going to read the first reading of Cranbury Township Ordinance number -24-05, an ordinance of the Township of Cranbury in Essex County, New Jersey, authorizing the acquisition of certain real property located at 1234 South River Road, Block 2.01, Lot 1, and 1274 South River Road, 5, Lot 16.01 for affordable housing purposes. This is reading, and the second reading will be on May 12th, 2025. We can have a motion to introduce.
Got to get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Move on to roll call. Mr. Christopher?
Yes.
Mrs. Elbadawi?
Yes.
Dr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
And Mayor Kinnear?
Yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Can I get a motion to move consent resolutions A through C this evening? A second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We'll move on to roll call. Christopher?
Yes.
Mrs. Elbadawi?
Yes.
Dr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mayor Kinnear?
Yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Okay, now we're going to move to the meat of our meeting, which is we will now enter into a working session, a joint working session with our Historic Preservation Commission to discuss Michael Pertindick's request to amend deed restriction on the Dancer House. And with that, I'm going to open the floor. Yeah, if you would.
Okay, so, can people hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
So I may need this.
Yeah, talk loud.
I'll talk. Okay, so stick it right in.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, so I'm Steve Goodell, I'm the township engineer, you don't know me. I am here today because we've got this issue involving the Pertindick house and the deed restriction. That means that there's an intersection of engineering issues, policy issues, and legal issues that have all come together. So to do is lay out a little bit of the history that I've been able to find and develop over the past week or so as I've done a deep dive into some of these legal documents and learned new things even as of 5 o'clock today. And then give, for the Township Committee, an idea of what to be looking for as you begin to make a decision about whether the deed restriction on the house ought to be vacant. Now, this is a work session. There is not a decision that's going to be made today. This is an opportunity for the Township Committee to begin its action to make this, to see whether it's going to make this very difficult decision. If you decide that you do at some point want to vacate it, there would have to be a hearing on notice to the public at a township committee meeting. So again, this is a work session. You're going to hear from various witnesses, hear from the Britannics, from their lawyer, maybe from some of their experts. You're going to hear from the Historic Preservation Commission. They can give you their ideas about the policy considerations, the historic considerations you ought to be considering. And I can talk to you about some of the legal considerations. So let me first start with some background. And what I can do is give you some history that goes back to 2004. Start with November 2nd, 2004. That was the day the Historic Preservation Office, otherwise known as SHPO, issued an opinion letter about what was then Barclay Farm. The opinion letter said that the farm is eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places under both criteria A and criteria C. A is events that have made a significant contribution to the broad pattern past, and C is architecture, distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction. So what they issued an opinion letter, and as a result, if you look up under SHPO designations, you will find the Barclay Farm listed. About 10 days later, the SAT, Agriculture Development Committee, this is the group that authorizes and actually uses proceeds from the Department of Agriculture to buy and sell agricultural development easements. They purchased an easement from the township. The township owned the property at that point. And the SADC purchased with what we call agricultural easement. They purchased all of the development rights from that property. So right now, the state owns the development rights, and any owner of the land cannot develop it. They can only use it for agricultural purposes under the terms of that easement. There was a second issue, though, that was raised in that state easement. There was recognition that there was a historic house property and that there would be a further easement restricting the historic use of that house. So here's what that easement said. Now, again, we're talking about the SADC 2000 easement. It said, improvements to the historic residential building shall be consistent with agriculture or single and extended family residential uses, and shall be subject to a historic preservation easement which shall be placed on the premises. It further says, no historic building or located on the premises may be demolished by the grantor, at that township was the grantor, or any person without the prior approval of the State Agriculture Development Committee, and subject further to the terms of the preservation easement referenced in paragraph 14 above. So what that tells us is, again, the state did two things. It bought the development rights and rendered the property good only for agriculture, and anticipated that there would be a more detailed historic restriction placed on somebody, in this case it would be the township, and that if the historic was to be demolished, the SADC itself would have to approve it. Then, remember, the township owned the property at this point. So in October, a month later, the township put the property up for auction. And the winning bidder was Arthur Dancer. He immediately had buyer's remorse. He didn't want to be stuck with the deed restriction that the township had imposed on the property. I don't know, maybe he also thought too much, but he sued to try to get out of the contract. That case went to the Superior Court, the township won, and then it went to the Appellate Division, and the township won again, clearing the way to sell the property, theoretically to Dancer, with restriction in place. I don't know what happened After that, the appellate division decision was in 2000, so there was a 2-year period when it was in litigation. We do know that on August 23rd, 2007, so another year later, the township did not end up selling the property to Mr. Dancer, but instead to a corporation called West Orange Baby. And at that time, the township's deed restriction went into place. And that restriction says, grantee, it's the purchaser, shall not demolish, move, or raise the facades or the building without the express consent of the Township Committee of the Township of Cranbury, acting in consultation with the Township's Historic Preservation Commission, which consent shall be granted only in exceptional circumstances. So the Pertinics own the property, and they would like the Township Committee to allow them to demolish, remove, or raise the facades or the building, say that there are exceptional circumstances for doing so. This is the Township Committee's first opportunity to collectively, as a group, hear, I don't want to say testimony, but hear information from interested parties about why they should or should not do that. The burden is exceptional circumstances. That's what they're looking for. Are there exceptional circumstances? Are there policy considerations in favor of keeping the restriction in place? Are there practical reasons for releasing it? All of this is just for tonight's conversation. And again, no decision is going to be made now. So that is a background. I think first people we should probably hear from is Mr. Citron and the Pertinics, so that they can tell you what they want to do. And you can hear from Historic Preservation and any other people about why they think that there's different things to consider.
Thank you very much. Okay, can you introduce yourself to us?
Thank you. I'm Mark Citron. I'm an attorney. I'm a partner in the law firm of Saul Ewing. And this evening, obviously, to seek consent to demolish the house, but I want to expand on that. And I'm going to ask my client, Michael Pertinic, to come forward.
Hi, everyone. First of all, introduce. So, my name is Michael Pertinic. I am fourth generation.
Oh, hold on one sec. I'm gonna give you 2 mics and we'll share up here.
Okay.
It's like not doing that.
Thank you. May I begin? Okay. So, I'm fourth generation here in Cranbury Township. My great-grandparents moved here in 1929 to Prospect Plains. So we've nearly 100 years.
Oh, you'd have to speak
Oh.
louder. They're saying they can't hear.
How about now? Good? Okay. So, as I was saying, my great-grandparents moved here in 1929, and soon we will be coming up on 100 years, our family in this township. Me and my father, we still farm. It's just him and I that we take care of everything that needs to be taken care of.
What's your relationship to 147 Ensborough Road?
So we purchased that property at the very end of 2022, I do believe. We took a lot of thought in how we were going to approach this matter. It was not a overnight snap of the fingers decision to go through this process. We had a couple opinions from builders, construction, that looked at it, and they declined to work. They did not want to look at it any further. They basically looked at it, rolled in the truck, looked at it, and said goodbye. And that was multiple people looked at it that way.
Let me ask you a question. The proposal that's been laid out is you want to get rid of the deed restriction. Is that accurate?
I think that is what we are requesting. We are requesting the ability to demolish as it is described in the deed easement.
And then what do you want to do?
Then we are going to build a essentially a replica of the existing home. Something that will survive for many years to come, something that does justice to the previous structure.
And in the deed restriction requirement that it be treated as a residence, what do you intend to do?
I intend to live there myself. Currently, it is uninhabitable. It has been for a very long time.
Do you know when the structure was built? Approximately.
Circa 1860s is what I've read.
Have you walked through the house personally? And walk through may be an exaggeration.
Okay, so walk through, yes, very calculated with your steps. As I said before, people who came to look declined looking from the outside. They would not even enter the home. I've had some of my experts in there, and I think you'll hear more about that from them, what their opinion is. Now, there are some nice details in the structure. In the second story, there is wide plank flooring, which, if possible, to be reclaimed or resurfaced, we would use in the new build, because that is something that is really salvageable. But I mean, there's other experts that can speak to that better than I can. However, when you go through the process of taking that stuff out of the structure, you don't know what's going to happen. Some of those boards they are not structural boards, but they may actually be holding things together more than we know.
Thank you. Shall I proceed with,
Yes.
okay, why don't you have a seat?
I'm sorry? Yeah. No, I just turned it off.
Okay. I'd like to call Matthew Young. Mr. Young, could you please state your name?
Matthew Young.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a structural engineer. I work for Baker Ingram Associates, located in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland.
And did you have occasion to look at this house, examine it?
I did. I was reached out to by Rob Marlin, RJM Architecture, to assist in reviewing, doing a structural assessment of the residence. This was early fall last year, and late October is when I visited the site and did, believe it or not, a full walkthrough of the building.
Do you have any photographs?
Yes.
Could you post them?
Up here.
Wherever.
Sorry, copies of the report we can share.
I believe that the committee has been provided with copies of the photographs. If you could describe what, thank you, Melissa.
So what was observed was primarily done in the basement, as that was where the structure was. The rest of the...
I'm going to ask you to wait until the Township Committee has an opportunity to pass out those photographs.
Why don't we, we've got a lot left over, why don't we put them back so that members of the public can see them?
Thank you, Mr. Goodell. Shall we? If you could describe what is shown in each of those pictures,
Sure.
starting off with the basement.
Yes. If you want, you can look at page 2 of the report. To clarify, it's the Baker Ingram and Associates report. If you have both. The first, starting in the basement, the first photograph there was a retrofit structural post.
What does that mean?
Was added after the fact to strengthen the floor in some way. In this particular case, it appeared to be a log or a tree that was stuck in, and it was also sitting directly on the slab in the basement. There'd be no real sign of a foundation underneath of it, and that was actually showing signs of deterioration. Similar in our second picture there, it's another recycled wood pillar. Not sure where, but it was recycled and put in place, and again, no sign of any foundation.
Is that either of those two of historic significance?
No.
Please proceed.
On to page 3, again, we're still in the basement. As I said, most of the surveying was done. This is one of the typical end joints, which is completely failed. And you can also see significant wood boring insect damage to both the joist and the girder there.
How long would it take for that type of damage to occur?
I can't really say, but this would be years of damage. I believe this particular spot was located towards the center of the structure. Insects usually come at the perimeter and they find their way in the middle. And the insects pretty much had found their way throughout the first floor structure there.
Please proceed.
On page 4 photographs, another wood post with insect damage, and then further insect damage below that with one of the beams. One of the tests we do to determine the structural integrity of the lumber is to basically prod it with an awl.
Did you do that?
I did.
What did you find?
The awl went into the wood up to 2 inches, which is about halfway through the members.
What does that tell you?
It tells me that significant wood infestation or wood-boring insect infestation has occurred over a period of time.
And what is the impact on the structure itself?
It's failed. It's no longer doing its job as a structural member.
Please proceed.
Continuing on to page 5. This was a condition at the perimeter. The foundation walls are typically stone and mortar, which would be common with the age of the
Anything unique about that? About the foundation?
Condition? Yeah, absolutely.
Please explain.
There were signs of mortar wearing away. It softened, which is common with the age, but as a result, is not being maintained over several years. The stones wall have become loosened, some have fallen.
Let me stop you for a second. When you say several years, do you mean
Decades.
10 years, 20 years, 2 years?
This is decades.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Some attempts have been made in there. Looks like there's some placed at one time. Not necessarily done correctly or well. There's also some bowing in the foundation wall that was discovered. That you can see on page 6, holding up a level to the wall there, and it's inches out. There's also conditions where we have the first floor completely unsupported at the perimeter wall. That's back on page 5.
What's the consequence of that?
The consequence of that is what's happening. Of that portion of the building is actually dropping, and we're able to verify that it dropped in this first floor, and up on the second floor, we also saw a dip in the floor in this area as well. That's most of the first floor framing, the foundation that we ever see. I don't have a picture of this one, but continuation, most of it is a basement, but there appears to be a crawl space foundation on the one side. Crawl spaces are typically excavated at a higher level than basement, obviously, and what we discovered, or what appears to be, is what's called differential settlement.
What does that mean in layman's terms?
That the foundations on the one side have settled differently than the foundations on the other side.
And the consequence of that?
That is that there's a hump in the floor throughout the structure. On the first floor and second floor, we identified it, which we have some photographs of later in the report.
What's the significant hump in the floor? What's the consequence?
Well, what happens with that is that the members are overstressed and they ultimately will fail, not already fail.
Did you examine any other portions of the structure?
Yes, we went up to try to look at the second floor framing as well as the attic framing. Most of this had finishes on it, and this was a non-destructive survey, meaning we did not demo any of the finishes in there. However, there were some small areas of ceiling that had down or collapsed due to some water damage and other issues. So we were able to take a peek in there. We saw similar framing styles to one in the basement. Mortise and tenon, some of these mortise and tenon joints have started to separate and slide apart, likely due to movement of the structure, due to settlement and other family member issue.
Now you say there's what you observed personally water damage.
Yes.
What happens when there's water damage in a house?
Too much water on the wood will rot it out. It'll decay. It'll fail prematurely, and it also attracts more insects. We observed what was a previous leak at the roof that went down into the attic. That actually penetrated down to the second floor. So the attic framing and some of the second floor framing under this leaking portion was damaged. We couldn't directly see the structure behind the finishes, but it looked like some significant water damage had happened, and a further investigation, at least at that, would have to be required.
In your experience as an expert, when you see water damage of this type, what happens then, other than you've described insect infestation? Is there mold?
Yes, yeah, usually that comes about if it's left unaddressed for a period of time.
And was it unaddressed for a period of time?
It appeared so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please proceed.
Photographs on page 8 show some of what's happening with the floor as a result of both the hump that's occurring in the building due to the differential settlement, as well as the corner of the building that appears to be sinking or drooping due to not being supported at the foundation wall. And then up at the roof structure we were able to see as the attic space is unfinished. This had, aside from the water damage that was evident on the floor of the attic space, there was attachment, meaning there was no actual connections made between some of these roof members. There was no ridge beam, no collar ties. All these are what hold the roof together in a wind event, and none of that was evident. Further on, when I got out of the attic, did a walkthrough at the perimeter of the building, saw some signs of washout at the perimeter.
What does that mean?
Just due to either bad or bad water management of the structure. Water is rushing down around the structure and is moving the soil around it. And this can result in further settlement of the foundation and further damage of the wall itself. At the front of the building, we looked at the porch. The porch is completely collapsed. It has some shores holding it up. It didn't appear to be anything really remaining that was structurally sound. And the foundations were damaged on that as well.
Now, you've heard Mr. Protinik say that he'd like to demolish this structure and then incorporate whatever portions could be incorporated into essentially replica. Is this structure a good candidate for that?
Potentially. My conclusion was, at least for the first floor, that the first floor structure itself could really not be salvaged. The problem that I saw with this is, usually when we have this type of damage, we come in and we try to reinforce or bolster a failing floor. What pointed me to the conclusion of replacing the first floor was that it was throughout the entire first floor and able to shore up then the remaining building to do any sort of repair work. And if we are going to be replacing the first floor, we would have to shore up the exterior walls, the second floor, the attic, and the roof, essentially off of the existing foundation to rebuild the first floor.
Would there be a reasonable likelihood that that entire structure would collapse? Started playing with the first floor?
Yeah, absolutely. It would be a very technical maneuver to shore up that building, to replace that first floor. It would not be a task.
Okay. Does the committee, Mr. Goodell, have questions?
So you can do this a lot of different ways. Just take the witness at a time. Witness by witness, while it's fresh in your mind. All right, so this is to the committee. This is up to you how you want to run this and have it in a timely manner. You can ask witnesses question, witness by witness, or you can hear everything and then ask questions to people, call them back up. Really up to you how you want to run it at this point.
Is there a preference?
More efficacious to do it at the end.
Yeah.
Rather than
Just running list?
Yeah,
Everyone's
keep it-
capturing their questions?
take
Okay.
notes and then-
So what we'll do, Mr. Smith,
One or the other, so, okay.
So what we'll do, Mr. Citron, is put on all your witnesses, and then if they have questions, they'll ask questions to the individuals that can come up.
Okay, very good. Mr. Marlin?
So, I know the Township Committee has seen a lot of these already. I want to make sure that the public has a chance to see what they're talking about as well. So,
Sorry.
I want to make sure that some of these are distributed to members, to the public, and maybe if you could just angle that back just a little bit so that so many people can see what's on the board.
Shall we turn it so that the public can see it? I think that may be helpful. Is your mic on? Would you be so kind as to introduce yourself?
My name is Rob Moreland. I'm the architect that Michael had hired to come look at his existing building and potentially create a replica for it.
All right, I see a picture posted on that board. What is it showing?
The top two photographs are showing the existing elevation and porch.
And when did you visit?
Sorry. Can you introduce who we're talking to, if I missed, sorry, just once again?
Yes, I'm Rob Moreland. I'm the architect that Michael had hired of RJM Architecture. And I have with me.
Hi, I'm Lee DiPrinzio, also senior architect with Rob's firm.
Thank you.
I think you guys just speak louder.
Okay,
It's the only speaker over here, sorry.
sure.
Please proceed.
Okay, so the top two photos, existing structure when we visited in the fall of this year. It's the front elevation and the porch.
What did you see?
A lot of deterioration, most of it being propped up in place because it is falling down.
Did you examine the interior of the building?
We went through the interior briefly, and when Michael asked us our opinion on the structure, that's when we had told him we would reach out to a structural engineer, have them do a proper evaluation for us.
And as far as you are concerned, Mr. Protenick would like to build a replica, essentially. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And what actions did you take in that regard?
So we took some ground measurements, tried to get the proportions of the existing building. We took photos of some of the details, and then we tried to create, to our best ability, a replica to recreate what is there as far as new structure up to current codes, but mimicking existing as best we can, using modern materials.
And would it be your intent to try to save or salvage any existing structure?
Yes, Michael has indicated that he would like to save some if possible. I think it would have to be evaluated as it's taken to see if it can be reused, but that is his intent.
Is the house presently inhabitable?
I would say yes. It cannot be inhabited.
Habitable or inhabitable?
It is not. He cannot live in it currently.
Are there any mechanical systems there?
Not that I noticed, no.
Any power?
No power.
Plumbing?
No.
HVAC?
No.
What would it take to bring this up to code so that in compliance with the ordinance, one could live there and use it as a permanent residence? Answer that.
Yeah, I think that's hard to say. I think that was part of Matt's Young's discussion of like, I think evaluating the structure is the first step to see if he can do that. We got into anything further.
Okay, do you have anything to add to your testimony at this time?
No.
Would you be so kind as to introduce?
Hi, I'm Lee DiPrinzio. Work with Rob. Been involved in building architecture for over 35 years. And we went into this project looking at it on what we could conserve. And obviously after seeing what we saw, we called Matt, our structural engineer, and that's pretty common. We worked on projects in Haddonfield, Cape May Heights, and involved in historic buildings. And this is a beautiful architectural design, there's no question about it. You're looking at a period of time when colonial architecture, Civil War, and we were trying to look at it. Obviously, to bring a certificate of occupancy for this type of structure, we had to bring Matt and say, okay, what do we need to do to structurally have this space ready to go? And when Matt mentioned removing the first floor and trying to shore it, we shore too, because nothing is structurally able to be shored to. So we would be floating a second floor in the air as we're trying to rebuild the areas.
Would that work?
I mean, you know, it's obviously at any cost, anything can happen. But the current New Jersey International Building Code, the current energy codes, you're basically stripping the entire building. You are putting new systems. So when we looked at it, and Mike said, hey, what can we do? We thought trying to put a replica the closest we can and trying to use as many materials and details as we can to try to keep the image the best we can. No, it's not the same building. I know that, and it does hurt. I understand that, but it's just a practical method of trying to meet the current code. We find it's practically impossible.
Do you want to add anything to your testimony at this time? Okay.
the other witnesses. Let's hear.
John Harrison? Could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm John Harrison. I'm the owner of Harrison Hamnet Consulting Structural Engineering. We have a firm in Pennington, and we do work all over the country. One of my specialties is preservation architecture, or structural engineering for preservation architecture for a lot of architects in this area. And some of the experiences we had very similar to this one is a few buildings in Princeton. We are for the Historical Society of Princeton, we've restored the Hunt House, and we have restored the Updike Farm and all their barns. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And we've done most of the buildings down in Trenton for the Roebling stuff and a lot of homes. So we've been in a lot of like this. We've seen a lot, and we've had some over my 40-some years in the business.
And did you have an occasion to examine the structure?
Yes.
And would you please describe what you saw?
Well, the previous structural engineer pretty said kind of what I found. It's and frankly, I struggle a lot with these kind of houses.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, I'm a restore thing, but I come in, my first object is to save the structure. And that's how we approach it. And then when you looking at the items that are in there, and you start realizing what it would take to restore this building, and what's good and what's not good, and what's the fabric that you're trying to restore. And structurally, what components are you going to keep? Now we have a couple items when you talk about restoring. There's the New Jersey Rehabilitation Code, which helps these kind of projects. But it says a lot about what condition is it in. Not changing the usage, it's residential, so it's residential. But if it's not in good condition, you have to upgrade it. And to upgrade that building to code is almost restructuring it. So when I look at these things, I always look at, all right, what do you think we're gonna have to do? And the architect before me mentioned the mechanical system. I'm not an expert there, I just know what you have to do. And what happens in these situations, and the building is not a real practically architecture. The basement, it's almost height, so it's not a real functional, it's more utilitarian. The floors are uneven. There is water damage, and like we said, that there's a lot. So it's hard to see if there's any damage, but most likely, what I've seen is that when you have water like that, it stays in the structure, it can't dry, it out. So when you start taking the finishes out, you can have all kinds of structural problems.
Could you explain to a layperson like me what finish means?
Well, finishes would be the plaster in the building, the drywall was there, floor coverings, that type of things, fireplace, mantles and that type of thing.
Is there anything that can be preserved or salvaged?
Well, you can always preserve and salvage things, but in this particular case, there's not much there structurally. I mean, if I built this house new and I put finishes back, even an expert could not tell what was behind these finishes, which is the structure, which is what we do.
And you've seen, or you've listened to the prior testimony of Mr. Young, and you've looked at the picture. Do you disagree with any of the conclusions that he's reached?
No, I don't. You know, one of the things that I did with this that we struggle with, and quite frankly, very similar projects that we've done, one in Princeton and the Hopewell Inn that you might see in Hopewell. That was one where we were doing the same thing that we're doing here. It was a building that wasn't in that good, but it wasn't terrible, and you could restore it, but it wasn't functional. And you could, even if you restored it, you wouldn't have a product that you could that would be good at the end. And that's what I look at too, is what's product for the owner of this house. And when someone says they're going to restore it or replicate what we've got, to me that's kind of a win-win for him, because we can this building, but the end product won't be as good, and the cost, as I said in my report, will probably be more. It will rival it, but it will probably be more than what the proposed removing and rebuilding.
I'm going to put aside the cost, because that's going to be a burden that Mr. Pertinick will have to bear. Is this a candidate for demolition and replication, so to speak?
Absolutely.
I have no further questions.
Any other witnesses, Mr. Sergeant? Okay. I think now the best thing to do is, let's hear from the HPC. I don't know whether you want to speak through one person or whether more than one of you want to come up, but I know you have looked very carefully at this property. You've got opinions that you put in writing related to the Township Committee. I want to hear from you now. Yeah, you can say, you can. Marshall, yeah, you can say that.
Jennifer, while we might know you, would you please introduce yourselves as well to everyone in the room? Thank you.
Either way, just click the bottom.
Good evening. Click the bottom. It's just the little button. And then the light goes on. Oh, okay. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. Good evening. My name is Jennifer Sattmeyer. I am the chair of Cranbury's Historic Preservation Commission. I'm also here with
Susan Ryan. I'm the vice chair for the Cranbury Historic Preservation Commission.
I represent a group of extremely educated and experienced committee members. We have dozens of years of experience in various areas of historic preservation. When this request was sent to us, we took it quite seriously. We tabled a lot of our current initiatives to review this, and we have spent a lot of hours researching. We also consulted with the Cranbury Historical and Preservation Society, who provided us with some important information, and we also had a very rich history from a town historian, Chambers, and I sent that history of the farm to you all this afternoon. I'm just going to go through our executive summary I shared with you guys earlier this afternoon. And based on the information that we had received as of yesterday, and I do believe as well, Sue, if you agree, I don't believe any additional information we received today is enough to change kind of what we had seen based on reports, as the testimony that just basically went through the reports and the building plans. The Historic Preservation Commission is not in a position to recommend that the Township Committee approve the Pertinick family's request to lift the deed restriction on the Barkley Farm property. Our concerns are as follows. The engineering reports provided to date do not sufficiently support a case for demolition. I'm happy to go into more details later if you would like. The rationale also presented for demolition does not align with the intent of the deed restriction, which was a commitment and an investment made by the town of Cranbury. Thirdly, the current concept for a replica structure designed forth by the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, nor is there evidence that's concrete that it would be a cost-effective action versus restoration. Moving forward with demolition would be interpreted as the TC allowing for demolition by neglect. This is a significant action that would be taken, and it may inadvertently create a new precedent to all the historic property owners in Cranbury that they need not maintain or preserve their properties.
Therefore, HPC recommends that the Pertinick family restore and/or rehab property, preserving Cranberry's agricultural history, scenic vistas, historic, while also supporting the family's desire to live and grow within our community. We've listed out a series of next steps, the first of which would be a concept with HPC. Would you like us to elaborate on any of the points in our executive summary?
I think that would be valuable. Yeah. So I saw the executive summary this afternoon. I know the Township Committee has, but yes, it's got bullet points. Go ahead and elaborate.
Sure. So regarding any discussion about the property not being designated enough or historically designated, we just wanted to first put out that any argument in that area would be inaccurate. The property is not part of the National Register, as our township attorney had mentioned, but it is part of the state of New Jersey's Preservation Office Register of Historic Places. It's been there since 2000. This does not mean that it is any less historic than a property that's on the National Register. The only difference is that it hasn't been submitted to the National Register. As far as protections go, there's not really any major difference between a property that is registered with the state versus the National Register. Property owners have a lot of the rights. And so Cranberry, we presume, never proceeded with putting it on the National Register, but took a number of local actions, which are really the strong actions that are tied to something like this. And the New Jersey Register, by the way, is closely modeled after the National Register program. We mentioned before there's the SHPO opinion, and we really do believe that this deed restriction was a commitment and investment by the town of Cranberry. At this point, making this change would be detrimental to investments that the town has already made. Case in point, when the township purchased the property without the easement, they purchased it for $1 million more than they ended up selling it for. This investment was all to preserve the farmland and the structure. And since the township has devalued the land, every subsequent owner, including the current owner, was able to purchase property at a reduced cost because of the restriction that was put in place. Another point that we wanted to mention is that the engineering reports, in our opinion, are missing some critical information, and it kind of seems a little odd to us that the reports only seem to point out in the property, that the reports do indicate that the structure can be restored at a financial price, which is contrary to what is spoken about in the deed restriction. And we also believe that it's unfortunate that the engineering report is missing a number of sections that a traditional engineering report on historic structures include. This includes just the basic plans for the original structure, which are not included. I do have a sample of a proper, what I believe as historic preservationist, engineering report that I'd love to show. A proper engineering report, a structural engineering report, would include a brief history of the structure. It would include a structural overview of the entire house, not just the defects. It would include plans, and it would go through current conditions in each room, and also include recommendations for remediation. None of those things were included in the reports that we looked at. It seems like they were just sort of, and so we would love to, in order to feel comfortable with this recommendation, we'd like to see a more complete engineering report. Another point we wanted to mention is that, building the modern home with a replica facade, we don't believe it mitigates demolition by neglect. We believe that raising the entire structure is not consistent with the Secretary of Interior's standards for reconstruction. I included a list of those in the testimonies we just heard. I didn't hear a single mention of the Secretary of Interior standards, which
I would love to hear more about how the owners are to review that. But the standards currently do not allow for you to just demolish an entire home and just try to find similar materials and rebuild it. You're supposed to have a thorough archaeological investment. You're supposed to have plans to accurately depict all the historic features and recreate the exact materials, design, even color and texture of the replica. And we looked at plans for a replica, but there were no plans made of the original house. So it seems like we kind of missed a step. We also think that it would be helpful for the property owners to commission a historical resource study. And I do have some samples of historical resource studies. These are studies that are more comprehensive and takes a look at the impact of this potential decision on our neighbors, on the historic district, on the existing infrastructure, and on the environment. So we recommend that as well before any decision is made. We think that it would be helpful to understand, is this going to be the last of this kind that would be gone forever? Lastly, and I know what I said and saying here is, you know, a lot of information that maybe the family will not be so happy to hear, that they, you know, welcomed a number of folks here tonight, but HPC would truly welcome the opportunity to work with them through the restoration process. We have been around for quite some time, we have lots of experience, and we are flexible in terms of working with helping families live in historic homes and renovate historic homes to grow for the future. We've approved additions in a number of structures in our historic district. We have worked with a number of structures that were in very bad shape, that had structural problems, and they were remediated and restored. And we also not only are, you know, government entity, but we also want to be a resource to the family to help them with the restoration process. So with that, that's collective feedback based on the information we have right now.
So just bottom line, what is it you would like to see happen to that property?
We would like to see concept designs for the structure to be restored. And should they require, you know, based on the plans, it appears that the family is looking to add a garage, because they're a modern family. They would include the plans for the garage in a concept review with HPC and move forward with restoring the home.
Are you going to do well?
No, I don't really have much to add to the to Jennifer's presentation. I think I do want to point out one comment that was made by one of the previous experts, where they did point out that I think there was a question about systems. So these are structural engineers. They assessed the structure. They did it accurately. They have good reputations. But it is not a wholesale building assessment. They, you know, admitted they are not experts on creating the mechanical systems, the plumbing, power, things like that, or even new amenities, solar. So there's a piece missing in the testimony about the entirety of the thing. And I think there's more information that's needed.
Okay, and so again, just bottom line there, as you know, the Township Committee is not going to make any decision now. If you think additional information is needed for them to shore up their case, what is it would like to see from them? A full engineering report like the one that you showed us?
I would go further beyond an engineering report and be doing an assessment of the entire building. So talking about the finishes, talking about the systems, the structure fundamental, right? It is the basis of the building being able to stand. But I think there's a lot more to be assessed, and I think there will be value found to make the case to restore the building instead of demolishing and replacing it.
Good.
Okay, do we have, are you all set? Anything? Okay, great. I think now we'll open it up to members of the public if they'd like to make a comment. The rules of public comment are still the same? Yes. So we have a 3-minute limit for public comment.
Before we go, can I give you guys a sample of the historic resource
Yeah,
corridor?
thank you, Jen.
I have a bunch, they're all different. They're all done in nearby Pennsylvania.
Oh.
Also comment, so, yes, sir.
Right there.
Pick up a microphone.
Let's see this.
Have a seat.
This is a.
You can have a seat, and then you'll sign in on that sign-in sheet. And then just as a reminder to the public comment to 3 minutes. If you could say your name as well and introduce yourself, thank you.
Yes, hi, good evening. My name is Andy Henry. I'm one of the owners of the family farm and homestead at 1234 South River Road that the town wants to convert to housing. This farm has been in my family since 1850.
Sir, I'm so sorry. Sorry to interrupt you. The public comment that we've entered is on the current working session that we're having. And when we're done with the working session, we'll open up our meeting to public comment on any other topic. So the public comment that we have opened up is specifically on the working session we're having right now. Sorry if I did not make that clear, but you will have your opportunity in a little bit. Thank you. Sorry.
In keeping with our 3 minutes, we're here in duo, so we can read the letter and then give the Township Committee letter. Jean will start her 3 minutes when she's up. I'm sure Betty will notify us and I'll continue.
Hi, good evening. Jean Golisano. This is a letter from the Historic Preservation, Cranbury Historical and Preservation Society. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the owners of the property located at 147 Plainsboro Road, known as the Dancer House, is requesting that the township grant permission to demolish the house. Their reasons, as stated in their email dated February 21, 2025, is that their structural engineering reports state that, quote, it would be best to demolish the existing structure and build a replica to the same specs, end quote. We totally disagree and wish to highlight several issues. The assertion that a replica can replace, underscored, the original building is not correct. Cranbury is not a Williamsburg with replicas of original buildings. If other property owners made same the assertion that a replica would be better than restoration, then many of the buildings and houses in the village and the farmland buildings around it would not exist today, and Cranbury would not be, quote, the best preserved 19th century village in Middlesex County, end quote. Other properties that have undergone restoration efforts in lieu of demolition include the museum on East Park Place, the Hess Farmstead on Prospect Plains Road, the Gristmiller's House South Main Street, the Holland House on Cranbury Station Road, and the 1713 East Jersey Cottage on Old Trenton Road. The property in question was purchased by the owner in 2022. At the time of purchase, they should have been aware of the deed restriction regarding the preservation easement about the house. They should have had a professional engineering evaluation completed at the time of purchase, as any prospective purchaser of a home would do. Therefore, they should have known about the condition of the house when they purchased it. The house sat dormant for almost 2 years when they had inspection reports prepared by structural engineers in 2024. For the 2 years since the purchase, nothing was done to prevent further deterioration, and we can only assume that the owners hoped that would be demolished by neglect. In October of 2024, CHPS presented a letter to the Township Committee regarding our concerns about the building, and we requested that the action be taken by the Township. We are not aware that anything was done in that regard. Do you want to finish?
So from the deed restriction, quote, consent to demolish shall be granted in exceptional circumstances, such as an event of excessive structural damage to or partial or total destruction of the building, Financial hardship shall not constitute an exceptional circumstance. Neither of the structural engineers indicate the building is not structurally sound, but that it would cost less to replace it than restore it. Quoting from the report of one of the owner's structural engineers, we would also like to note that most buildings in the shape of the one in question can be salvaged and restored. It would take a desire and financial commitments. We request the Historic Preservation Commission and the committee deny the request to allow demolition of the structure as required by the deed restriction. They have not provided proof of, quote, exceptional circumstances as required by the deed restriction. We also request that the township take positive action as required in Section G of the deed restriction. The terms of the easement have been violated, and the township may, quote, bring proceedings in court to require the restoration of the facades to the condition and appearance required under the easement. Continued no action by the owner will lead to demolition by neglect. The township must take positive action now to save this house. It's signed by myself, Mark Rakowski. I'm a registered architect in the state of New Jersey, practicing for over 50 years, Cranbury for over 40 years, have participated in most of the restoration projects that we've examined, including the History Center. The structure is exposed so people can see what a whole old house looks like. Also, we have attachments from the email from Mr. Pertinick dated February 21, 2025, and portions of 2 engineering reports, which you already given full copies, and a portion of the deed restriction, paragraph B and G, which are highlighted. So we thank you for your consideration.
Okay, do I need to turn this on?
It's on.
It is on?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, please.
You're gonna need it right up to your mouse and your microphone, yeah. And if you could
Okay,
please
there, I
introduce
got it
yourself.
now. Thank you.
Introduce yourself. Thank you.
I shall, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, John Chambers here, Cranbury resident, and professional historian. And as a professional historian, I want to express my total opposition to the proposed demolition of the historic farmhouse called the Dancer House over on 147 Plainsboro Road. In my thinking, this is a historic structure. The present house dates back to 1860, and that is the date recognized on the Middlesex County and state registers, as we've heard, list of historic structures. But there is evidence in the basement, brick floor and different framing that indicates the current house may be sited on an even older antebellum farmhouse. The fact that it's part of the old Barclay farm and the house's relationship to the Dancer family adds weight to its importance. The Barclays were one of the oldest and most prominent families in Cranbury, arriving in the 1680s with the Scottish ships that founded the seaport at Perth Amboy as a center to an extensive settlement in central East New Jersey at the time. The Barclay farmhouse is also known as the Dancer House because the Dancers rented the house and the farm and farmed the land for much of the last century. They ultimately became a stalwart for farmland preservation and helped other farmers to convince them to support it. Historically, Cranbury was a crossroads village surrounded by farmlands dotted with farmhouses. The Barclay Dancer farmhouse, if I may call it, from the mid-19th century is the farmhouse, working farm closest to the village, and one that serves the historic vista as a person drives down Plainsboro Road to the village. The farm village connection has been part of Cranbury's history for more than 300 years. As a result, I strongly urge you, members of the Township Committee, to deny the request to allow demolition of this truly historic structure, the Danzer Farms. Instead, I urge the Township to prevent further demolition neglect and to require the building's restoration, at least the facade of the building, what people see. The 19th century farmhouse is, in my estimation, irreplaceable. In regard to creating a replica, as one who's toured many historic houses, I can say that the reproduction is never the same. That's the real thing. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else with public comment? Okay. All right, so seeing none, we'll close the public comment section of this, and now I believe we can move into...
This is the chance for committee members to ask questions of the people who've testified.
Okay. All right. Okay, hopefully we've been keeping our notes and questions. Who wants to start? Matt.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for the architect, either one of the engineers. Looking at the photos of the house as it is now, it's pretty obvious that that's not the original clapboard siding. It's maybe asphalt shingles or something on the siding. And additionally, it looks like they put storm windows in there and cut away a lot of the original molding from the exterior molding of the windows. The question for you is you might not know the answer to this, but how much of the actual historical facade is still left on this building? I mean, I see the architectural details on the porch and on the soffits, but beyond that, I'm just what is actually left of the facade.
Let's come to the table.
I don't know, we didn't study that.
Oh, you want?
Yeah, we need to.
Just say it on the microphone.
Say it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. As a structural engineer, I did not look at the outside to see what was original and what's not. But I did look at it to the point of what would it take to restore some issues. And you know, one of the key things for me was the fascia and the soffits, which is quite elegant and quite historic. But most of that was rotted. So when we can't restore that wood, we're basically going to do new wood to replace that. And so that all that the dental work and the fascia, which is, like I said, which is really spectacular, that's going to be rebuilt whether you restore it or you put a new one there. So, and siding of the same thing will need to be replaced. So what's original? No, I didn't do that. That's really not my expertise. I'm just trying to figure out how to restore.
Thank you.
A bit of a different question, but you or some of your colleagues may be able to answer it. In the reports, there's often the structure may be a candidate for demo, right? And in the reports, I don't see or read anything definitive that the structure cannot be restored. I think that's some sort of clarification on the ability, lack of, you know, again, I'd say, I don't want to lead, I quote unquote lead the witness, but taking sort of finances out of the equation to some extent, what does the may be a candidate mean?
Where the reason for that is that I think, as we previously said, or someone else said, that means and methods, meaning the way in which we would need to restore a building like that, anything is possible. We can dump enough money into anything to make it work. The problem is that I had why we wouldn't be able to take that approach is that we would basically be, if we were to restore it, we'd just replace every single item in there piece by piece until you have a brand new building that's replaced piece by piece.
So, that sort of answer?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely helps.
Yeah, I mean, we can't, it's very difficult, particularly because we didn't have a full analysis of the structure with all the finishes in there, that based on what we saw, good candidate, but we can't conclusively say, yes, it must be.
That helps.
I don't know if you can answer this, but this is a question a little bit. So if the original exterior is new, or have you pulled off the? I mean, you said you haven't done any of that. Like, what is underneath? Could that, you know?
We, as part of my part of the work, we haven't removed or demoed anything. But we're not allowed to. Is what they're saying. With that, I would take serious precautions removing anything at first. That could be holding the building up. As silly as that sounds, but it's literally part of the shear walls that hold the structure up. So you'd be very careful. I suspect a lot of it is loose, a lot of it is rotted. So in order to do that type of investigation, I would highly recommend shoring up the entire building before any demo or any further excavation be done.
1,800 houses. What would a house be made out of? Like, would it be wooden underneath? I mean, like what would be underneath?
As far as the structure?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be all wood framed.
I think we're kind of staying on the facade part. It's very specific in the deed restriction. Who is best qualified to assess what is original on the facade of that home to what has been replaced? What expert
What about
and
the shutters? Like the shutters? Like to be saved? Yeah, I don't know.
It's not my area of expertise.
Okay.
Structure.
Jen, you can help us?
I think
The microphone, so that everyone can hear you. And the reason we're asking the question is you need an inventory from a facade perspective of what is originally there. What are we asking to preserve on the facade?
Yes, and per our recommendation, the homeowners conducting a thorough historic review and report and hiring another expert to really evaluate this, I think it would be really great. There are no pictures that I see here of the old pictures from the house, and those pictures exist. And it would, I think in our circle of history, we have there are experts that can answer these questions, that these architects, I know, are focused on building something new. There are different experts out there that will be able to, obtain pictures, older pictures of the house, so that they can see how it, used to look, and identify which materials are antique.
We actually do have a brochure that shows one of the original facade before any extensive damage happened to it. Which we should get enough for a picture.
So, that's a good start. I think there are other experts as well, and there are other pictures out there. So, the Cranbury History Center is open on Thursdays. They have information. It would be so great if, the family could consult with some historic experts. And again, start inventory of what's there already before jumping into building of plans and looking at plans of a modern home. Yeah, so that's common.
Adding again to Ms. Meier's testimony, I should point out that I am a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey with a specialty in historic preservation. And so I have been dealing with properties like this for the last 30 years. So you wouldn't hire me, I work for a public institution, but you would hire someone, an architecture firm with that knowledge, who can do the assessments, who has the background history, understand what is significant to point out the positive features that are there. So that's my recommendation.
All right, I have a bunch of questions, and I'm so sorry for bringing a couple of you up at different times. Thank you all for your testimony today. It has definitely brought to life, at least for me, a lot of these words on paper, you know, in a field that I don't necessarily, I'm not very connected to history and structures and buildings and all of that. So thank you for all of this testimony. I have, you know, some technical questions and not so technical questions. I'm really curious to know, Mr. Prutinik, what drew you to this property? Was it more the farm, or was it more the house?
I think.
Mike,
I'm sorry. You have to turn the mic off. Okay, let's run one at a time.
The whole package, right? Because it gives us the opportunity to remain in the township, and it's the perfect setting for how I imagine the township looked when my great-grandparents came here.
So, do you, did you start this project with there to, or an interest at least to honor some of the historic integrity of that structure?
Absolutely. Like I said, when we first purchased the property, it was the very end of 2022 and winter was upon us. It was hard to get builders at that, or any experts really, to take a good look. Like I mentioned, they would drive up and they'd say no thank you and drive away. Very helpful. I think it was very disappointing for me to see people react that way, because it's not easy to be doing this. I don't enjoy doing this. This is not what I do. This is not who I am. To have something that I can live in and be safe, that would be the ultimate goal, right? So I can remain here, my family can remain here for another 100 years, which would be great. That would be amazing.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And so it was a little bit of a surprise to you to find the condition of the house to be as far in disrepair as you have found it?
Correct. So as per the, we cannot take things off to look and see what's behind it. So we are kind of doing this from the inside out, from the bottom up. Does that make sense? I looked at the house and I said, okay, I'm gonna have some people at it. That, you know, that's where we're gonna start. I even had Amish builders who were not inclined to investigate it further. They looked at it and they walk away. Who's your number? They will not call you back. During this time, I had fallen significantly ill in 23. I was in the hospital with a massive infection for about a week. That had set off a chain reaction of things and has delayed and prevented me from doing what I do on a daily basis. And this project is very important to me because it will give me a place to live where I will be safe. I was shortly thereafter diagnosed with disease late. It was diagnosed late. I've probably had it for 20 years. I cannot go outside in the winter because I have cryoglobulinemia. If I get cold, my body shuts down. It is actually very cold in here and I am not comfortable. It is hard for me to be here right now, sitting with the disease.
Thank you. I appreciate that information, and I certainly wish you well. I could just maybe switch gears a little bit and go a little bit technical here. Mr. Matthew, you had mentioned in your testimony on one of the pictures a hump on the floor, and you described it as it means that the members will fail. What do you mean by the members will fail? What is that term?
So the hump in the floor is due to the settlement foundation, and likely where that is occurring is over top of another wall. So what's happening is the members that are framing into that are getting pulled down, and they're not designed to flex or move in that way. And usually what happens is the connections of those will fail.
So,
or break.
Yeah, right. So that's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
So it would break, like the floor would essentially break.
Yeah, it could start with individual members of the joist could start breaking, and then yes.
Wow. Okay. It's very interesting, as Mike said earlier, that many people did not really want to assess this property. What told you you could assess this property?
I regularly, based on our region, we're down South Jersey, close to Canton, Haddonfield. We're regularly called to assess these types of structures. Usually I'm called in to restore them. I was the second structural engineer that came in. I read or heard about the first report, and I came in thinking that we would come in and try to salvage it. And then I went in and I saw the condition and ultimately changed my mind.
Okay. And we heard in public comment that the house, that the reports say that the house is, they say none of the reports say that the house is not structurally. Is that correct? Did any of you guys hear that in public comment? The comment was that none of the reports say that the house is not structurally sound. Is that the case?
It's not in my report. No, currently it is not structurally sound. In fact, I don't recommend anyone really go in there unless they're professional who understands where they're walking, what they're doing, and the risks that they're taking. When I went through there, I tried to understand the structure. That's why I started in the bottom and then I worked my way up. I've been in buildings that I don't go into rooms, I don't go into floors based on what I see below. And for this, I saw a safe passage throughout certain parts of the structure. And usually that's not going over top of wood floors, but rather bearing walls and stacking loads. They're less likely to fail when I'm walking.
And in following that safe passage, is that why the whole house wasn't assessed? You know, the chairperson from HPC did say that, you know, we haven't seen the integrity of each room has not been commented on here. Is there a reason for that?
Each room was looked at. I'm not too sure about that comment. Each room was looked at. There was structure to observe in most of those rooms. So as a structural engineer, when I look in a room and I see plaster walls everywhere and flooring, there's no structure to be seen there. So all I can do is assess based on the finishes. And that would be either cracks in the plaster walls or humps, and you know, kind of inferring what's happening beyond that.
Okay. I had one more question. This home is very much set back, and I will tell you very honestly, I've lived here for about 11 years, and it's a home that I often miss on the road. I don't pay attention, but I have, the application sort of came before us, and this is the commentary from last year. Home in its current condition, and we've heard that it is structurally not sound. If this home was closer to the street, I'm curious to know, in any of your expert experiences, if the vibrations of the road, vibrations of the vehicles, if any of that would have caused this home to maybe not be standing anymore. I'm curious to know whether it being so far set back has kind of kept it standing, but only just.
Can I say something to that?
Okay. So, I would agree with that assessment. I think the very same way. I also place not as heavily traveled as some of our other roads. So I think you are correct with your way of thinking, but I don't know how we would actually determine that.
The state of New Jersey report that came out from the DEP, this letter was dated September 2nd, 2004, and this was for the facade easement. And this, I don't know if there's a question in here or not, but this is just more for detailed education. What was really striking to me when I read this letter was that 21 years ago, a lot of the things that we're talking about tonight structurally in this house were identified then. So if you look at this detailed letter, I feel like I can compare it to both engineering reports that were done in the past months. So this is when the township owned property. So I'm struggling with this concept of the township committee at the, defending the historical nature of this house, that on their own watch, it was in disrepair, and then auctioned it with an easement. And that, I'm struggling to reconcile that in my brain, because the state came and they did a thorough examination of this property, and that's just personally where I'm struggling. This has been a long identified problem of the house. So I'm just maybe just stating that more to put it out there than to ask anyone a particular question. And we have this, that the township attorney at the time for our township, thus the township committee, would have been informed of that.
Can I ask a question of our attorney? We start with the SADC commentary, and the word you used is it is an opinion letter. In its form as an opinion, would the opinion maybe change at this current state that this home is in? It has gone further into disrepair?
So that, what you're talking about is not SADC, that's the SHPO.
Okay, the SHPO letter.
It's the same letter that the mayor just read from.
Yes, yes.
So that letter says a couple things, and I think the point was, when the property was going to go for sale, and the township owned it, but the township was going to sell the developments to the SADC, and they were going to then sell the property, stripped of its development rights, with a historic preservation easement. They anticipated that the state DEP would be the ones that took the historic preservation easement. SHPO is DEP. And so SHPO came in and looked at the property, and they said, we don't really want that easement. You township, you can put an easement on it if you want it, but we're not going to. So what that letter says is that they found some defects, and reading the case law, what the judge said as part of the opinion was that there was a change at that point. The township, since easement originally didn't go to SHPO, but then it was changed to DEP. There was a change in the bidding process, which is one of the reasons why it was appealed at the end of the day. There was a change sort of at the last minute. That doesn't mean that what the township did was in any way out of line or beyond what it could do. It was always anticipated that there would be an easement, historic easement on the property. The township imposed that easement. The court reviewed, they didn't review the easement, they reviewed this entire transaction, found that the property be sold with that easement on it, and that the buyer would be required to abide by it. So what you've got are two different governments making two different decisions. That is the letter, though, is an opinion letter. That's technically what they call it, an opinion letter. And the opinion that I read still stands, that they found that this property, even in that day, had historical significance and met the requirements for listing on the register. Even in they found it.
I want to ask a question. Chips wrote here something that I'm struggling with, honestly, is when you buy a piece of property, and it's in this paragraph here, at the time of purchase, they should have been aware of the deed restriction. Were you aware of the deed restriction?
Yes.
Okay. Regarding the preservation easement about the house, they should, thank you. And you know, I do appreciate everyone. I'm really, Iman, thank you for saying that. I do appreciate all the information and bringing all this paperwork to light. There's a lot of paperwork here. And there's a lot of time, yeah. And a lot of time is being spent from volunteers, professionals, and the passion is here on all sides, and I see it. So if I sound a little rough, I'm sorry. But for, so when I buy a property, this is what I'm really struggling with. And Chip's really beautifully here. They should have had a professional engineering inspection evaluation completed at the time or even before the purchase. I could have done that before the purchase, as any prospective purchaser of a home would do. And really, you should have known about the condition of the house when they purchased it. But not only that, it's been written about, like multiple times, the condition of the house. So, you know, I appreciate the 100 years of farming, and I'm on the ag, development, board, and I do appreciate farming, and that's one of the things that drew me to Cranbury. So, that's my question. That's what I'm struggling with. I don't know if it's a question, or did you have an engineer look at it?
I think, so the plot as is. Due diligence was very limited. When had very limited access to the house. However, the way I looked at it was, okay, but we can still do something with it. I went into it with a positive attitude. This is not, where we are today was not my original thought. That's not where this isn't where I started. As I discussed, when I brought in some local builders, just to look, just to say, hey, how can we start? I wanted to know, how do we start the process, right? How do we get going on this? And they would point out all the obvious things that we've discussed already. Just looking at the exterior, and they would not engage further. I couldn't get any more engagement of people. Does that suffice?
I understand. So you did have a chance.
I don't want to lean on this, but with my recent medical history, managing what I do with my family has become very difficult. At one point last winter, I would sleep for 16 hours a day. Could not get out and do things. I couldn't talk to people. I just couldn't do what I wanted to do at that time.
Any other questions?
What's the current square footage of this home?
2,400.
2,400. And the proposal is maintaining that 24 square foot footprint?
Correct.
But with the exception of the garage, not heated, right? So it's not considered toward the 3,500 cap on the property?
Yes.
Okay. So 2,400 approximately. Okay. And then just something that you just said, when you purchase something as is, which I would assume this is just the same as like we just described, any other home that we buy, that means you forfeit the right to an inspection when you buy something as is?
In a way, yes. It's like if you buy a car as is. You're not gonna look under the hood. You're not allowed to look under the hood. You just take what you get.
Okay.
And so diligence is really restricted.
Well, so that, Steve, that's because that expedites sale on the seller's side.
It's gonna affect the price too.
I'm going to just move out a little bit with my question. One of the very important things, and I've run up against this when I've tried to do things with the town, is the vista. Jennifer, can you maybe speak a little bit more about the importance of vistas in Cranbury and how this would affect a vista? Like, what is the vista? Like, I've run up against it, so I know what it is. But can you explain it a little bit more in the historic, terms, and our planning for the town?
Yes, if you look at of Cranbury, you can see that there's always a cluster of homes along Main Street, and then you'll see less density going further out into more farmhouses. The Dancer property is sort of, if you look at if I have maps and stuff I can show you, it is definitely the quintessential farmhouse that was the outside of town. And for Vista that we have preserved, you can see this farmhouse not only from Plainsboro Road, but you also see it from the school, the library, the West Property areas, as well as next door, I believe it's the Patterson Farm as well, you see it. So this farmhouse has a pretty significant vista, and I mean, not only is the structure important, one of the most important things as well, of course, was farmland to ensure that nothing else was built there. So that from the view of the town, you have the type of view that was seen back, hundreds of years ago, where it was a view of farmland and one farmhouse. Well,
More of a comment, we don't think the change of that house, either new or old, would affect the vista, do we? I don't think the project changed the footprint or the size or the height of the house.
No.
And are vistas in our master plan, or is it in a plan of some sort? I guess it's not impacting the vista, is what you're saying, so.
Yeah, the streetscape. It's also mentioned in the SHPO letter as well. It's part of the importance of our cultural history in Cranbury, and this house was identified as sort of a pivotal house that preserves that agricultural history. So,
and you are willing to work with the homeowner if
and then one other piece of information that's also interesting to me as a history geek is that there's also on the foundations and stuff from other prior structures. That's the thing why I really do wish that we would have an expert take a detailed look at this, because it's not just the home, also there are foundations, there are barns, and there was another house there before the other house, and you know, at least capturing that and making sure that we are aware of that. And just taking a bit more of a holistic approach at this versus just thinking of it as one home that we're going to raise and you know, try to build a replica. I think that this is a bigger issue than just that. So.
I want to ask a question that pertains to both of you that are sitting here. When we look through the letters, there are 3 facades that need to be preserved, pretty much. So there's two questions, right? So one question for HPC is any of the 3 facades more important aesthetically, do you think? And for you, my question is any of the facades more easily damaged than the other?
I don't know if I can really speak on that. I didn't look at the exterior finishes as a structural engineer.
And anybody else that could comment on that?
So in HPC, the way we look at structures typically is we look at the streetscape first. I mean, this is a unique situation because this is not, you know, along our main street in the historic district. But if you start by looking at the view from Plainsboro Road, that's where the address is. That side, I would though, however, possibly argue that the front porch, which is the true entrance, is probably the most important side of the home because it includes the most, you know, detailed compartments. It has the porch, for example.
That's east facing?
Facing, the side that's facing Main Street, yeah.
If I read the report correctly, that's the part of the structure that is in the most disrepair.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The side that is facing opposite of the Plainsboro Road side is the back, technically. And while it's ideal that there's a garage going there because that can be seen from the school and you know, the rest of the west property and that type of thing, I mean, this family is gonna need to live, you know, in a, you know, have a place for their car as a modern family. And in historic preservation, we do try to accommodate modern needs. So the back side would be like an appropriate place if we were looking at this, especially within our historic district, for an addition.
Any more questions? Okay. I just want to reiterate that large, open, unanswered question is actually what is original on this house from a facade. It's a major fact that is missing from this township committee to continue to educate ourselves.
Condition of it is.
Yeah, and what the condition of it is.
And I know I'm not holding a mic, but I would volunteer that the applicant will seek to get an analysis that you're requesting.
And, oh yeah, I assume you're okay with it.
So at this point, the committee's heard all the evidence, the testimony it's going to hear right now. Again, no decisions are being made. I think we've established that there's a process going forward. The applicant has certainly heard many of the concerns, heard from HPC, understand what would HPC make a decision. And Mr. Citron, I think you're interested in trying to follow up and get it the kind of detailed analysis they're looking for. That might be the next step, and it's a process that continues. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Okay. So we're going to close session, and now we will open it up to general public comment. That's not on this topic, so thank you for your patience in waiting to make your public comment. Just as a reminder, you can state your name again when you come up, and you'll have a minute time period that'll start.
Yes, hi, good evening, I'm Ann Henry, one of the owners of the family farm and homestead at 1234 South River Road that the town wants to convert to affordable housing. This farm has been in my family since 1850, when my great-grandparents bought it. My grandfather and my mother were both born in this farmhouse, and 3 generations of my family are buried here in town. My parents were both World War II veterans. My mother's name is inscribed on the memorial near the firehouse. About the farmhouse, it's almost 150 years old, it has a new roof, and we drilled a new well for the animals. The entire property is well maintained, and I personally pick up litter along a quarter-mile stretch of the South River Road adjacent to my property, and that is not without personal risk. Our fields are full of hay, and this is the only cow and sheep farm in the area. I think it is a green gem for Cranbury Township, and the only farm, specifically the only family farm left in Cranbury to the east of Route 130. The Hesses, Pertenics, Wilsons, Barclays, and Van Wicklands are long gone. Mr. Van was a World War I veteran who survived a gas attack. He lost his farmhouse when the turnpike was built because it split his property, farmhouse on one side, farmlands on the other. They refused to build him a bridge. So he was basically forced to sell, which began a trend of disappearing farmland. And I don't see any reason ours should be now. We've been fighting off developers for over 30 years, offering increasingly huge amounts of money to buy our property and turn it into warehouses. And we declined all those offers. But I was always concerned they would find some legal loophole to force us to sell. So I'm very disappointed to see the town I love doing exactly that. So I implore you to look at alternatives for this project, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Michael Kervan from Brainerd F. I'd like to, first, Barbara, I had a quick question for you. The solar update, if you're already a part of that, do you have to do anything to change anything, or is that going to update, do you know?
If you're a part, I'll answer. If you're a part of it already, your bill will now just be PSE&G, not okay yet.
Okay. Just want to make sure I didn't have to go in and make phone calls.
We usually don't answer questions without an
So yes, real quick, I won't run out of my. I know we just spent a good amount of time talking about the vistas coming into Cranbury, and he's right. That far is a vista coming into Cranbury. You drive by, you're like, oh look, there's animals. It's fenced in. It's really beautiful. And I'm just curious why we're not trying to do that instead of just automatically accruing that property for housing that I don't think we should build in the first place. Why are we fighting to preserve that piece of property as farmland preservation, or preserve it somehow so that we don't have to build on it? And the same goes for the house. That used to be a farmhouse on South River Road at 1274 as well. I know there's no farmland behind it anymore. I miss that because that's where my friend lived when I was growing up, and we spent time in that field out in the backyard. And now it's all warehouses. I don't know if there's a way to preserve that. I don't know if there's any historic significance to that house that we could look into a way to preserve that instead of building unnecessary buildings which is gonna put a burden on our schools, gonna put a burden on our emergency services, it's gonna put a burden on our town as a whole. I just wanna make sure that you guys are doing all that you can to look to alternatives instead of having to meet this unfunded mandate that came from urban areas that has a negative effect on rural areas such as our own. And I'd also just like to make the comment, and I appreciate you answering my question. This is the only opportunity that we get as townspeople to interact with the entire township committee as a whole. We can't meet with you in this kind of venue outside of this. We can't meet with you in any other venue outside of this as a whole township committee. And I feel interactions where you're not answering questions is very disrespectful to the people who come up here with comments and questions, when this is, like I said, the only opportunity we can actually communicate with all 5 of you at the same time. So I'd like to end with that. Thank you.
Lisa Rue, 18 Adams Drive. I am on the Cranbury Housing Association, but I am not representing the CHA this evening. I am here because I'm concerned about the 2 parcels of land you're planning to purchase for affordable housing. I still believe Cranbury's 265 unit obligation is high, and Cranbury should be requesting a decrease in the requirement. Also, fulfilling this excessive requirement on essentially just 2 locations means at least 1 large build. I believe a large build will be detrimental to the look and feel of our town. I'm also concerned about how a large build could affect our schools. I understand Cranbury School enrollment now than previous years. However, a large build would mean an immediate increase versus gradual, and of course there's the enrollment and costs for Princeton High School. Also, both these parcels would require busing, not just to the high school, but also to Cranbury School, which none of our other affordable housing requires. Because of these concerns, I hope the committee is considering senior living for these builds. However, I also recommend the township look into preserving some of our farmland, which would result in a lower overall housing requirement.
Jennifer Sutmeyer, 14 Scottsdale Court. I'm the chair of HPC, and I know I probably should say I'm going to speak just as myself and not on behalf of HPC, but I actually think I could probably speak on behalf of HPC and just say to y'all that when you guys are working on the affordable housing, it would be so great if you guys consulted with us before you decide to make this. I know this is just the first reading, but we have an entire list of properties that are sort of identified that we are working to, we're getting grant research and everything like that. And so like the Gentle Healing Spa, for example, has been on our list. That Farmstead as well is also on our list. And so we're here for you. We'd love to work with you. We're trying to figure out this affordable housing obligation. So, please feel free to reach out to us before you make decisions to purchase things. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, I think the last couple meetings and my mayor's update, I made a commitment that if we could address things, we would try. Again, it was a first reading tonight for the proposed, so there'll be formal public comment on that topic at our second reading, which is May the 12th. The other thing, I think that a little cue around affordable housing, the time period, the units, the types of units, whether they're family or senior, I think will help educate the community a little more. I'm hoping if I can do it tonight, it'll be part of my mayor's update. If not, there'll be, I think it's just a basic FAQ sheet on affordable will help maybe myth bust a little bit. Some comments that are out there and help clarify some things. So I commit that we'll make that as soon as possible. Okay? Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I have no idea where the agenda is, so I'm going to close public comment. Any action items besides my FAQs that I just mentioned? Okay. Hearing none, can I get a motion to adjourn our meeting this evening?
Second.
All in favor?